Hello, everyone. Derek Geisler here with PGH Networks, bringing you the third episode of our Lunchbox Leaders Cybersecurity Unfiltered series. I want to thank everybody for joining today. We have a pretty awesome event set up for today for you. We're going to have John Murchison with Blackpoint Cyber talking to us about how a hacker gets in and what the steps taken in order for them to steal your data. Before that, I wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items. So for all of you that haven't joined before, we have sent out some Grubhub vouchers for the first 50 people that did register. If for any reason you did not get that Grubhub voucher, first thing, please check your spam filter. It could be caught in your spam filter. And then secondly, if it isn't in your spam filter, please reach out to us and we'll make sure that we get that over to you. At the end of the event, like we did previously, we are going to be giving away some pretty cool giveaways. So Blackpoint, John and Blackpoint were so gracious. They're actually going to be giving away a bottle of their Blackpoint whiskey. So we will be using the Wheel of Names again to give away some of that awesome whiskey, thanks to John and his team. And then additionally, we're going to be in the true spirit of work from home. We're going to be giving away some mesh Wi-Fi for somebody to make things a little bit easier while you're working from home. So with that being said, I wanted to do a quick introduction to John Murchison with Blackpoint Cyber. If there's anybody in the industry that you could really call an expert, it's John. He has a long history in cybersecurity, worked at the NSA, did a little bit of work with the CIA. So really excited for John to talk to us today about cybersecurity. So John, I gave you a little bit of an introduction, but I'm sure you're going to be better at it than I am. So you're up, my man.
All right, thank you very much. So first off, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to sit and listen to a little bit of our presentation today. What I wanted to kind of cover today was a little bit about how a hacker would break you down as a target, give you some kind of free things you can implement to reduce your attack surface a bit. And just walk you step by step, both through the social engineering side of breaking down a target, and also from the side of once a hacker gets into your network, some of the challenges they have to go through. Derek and Nicole, I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen all right, and it's all looking good on your end.
Looks good from my end, Don.
Great. All right, so a little bit of background. So we're obviously a cybersecurity company, software as well as a services company based out of Maryland. As Derek said, my background, I spent 12 years at the National Security Agency. I don't know how to really describe it other than maybe being the bad guy for the right team. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is really just pragmatic advice. There's always a lot of coverage on, tools and exploits and backdoors, which is all really important. But, many times, like most industries, the fundamentals are really important. And so I'm going to kind of cover that and get into it. So a little bit of the agenda today, one of the things I'm going to talk about is how did we get in this position? What are the kind of common, themes and systems, and what has really driven kind of specifically ransomware and that form of exploitation become like a productized market, right? The bad guys actually have kind of a full business model on this, including tech support to help you pay them. So I want to kind of cover what caused all that. Then I'm going to kind of walk you through the steps of pre-exploitation research that a bad guy might go through. Some of the attacks are a little bit drive-by in nature, but the others are targeted. And there's some things you can do to reduce that attack surface. And then we're going to cover really what a hacker has to go through once they break into their network, because there's actually opportunities where the defenders have some more advantages over the bad guys in an early stage of a breach. Then I'm going to kind of talk about what you can do to kind of protect yourself better, and then go through a little baby case study of a pretty aggressive breach we stopped a few weeks ago on a city. So let's get into it. So when we talk
John,
about
real quick, real quick, I just want to make sure that we mention, as we go through this, how common this is
Yeah.
and that people are getting hacked, and who needs to be concerned or careful, right, with their business. I just kind of want to make sure that we kind of touch on that throughout this process, because it really is important that people understand that, it's really, size doesn't matter necessarily, right, from this perspective. So if we could kind of touch on that as we go, and then, as people ask questions, I will try and weigh in and kind of bring those questions to light for you, so we can answer them as we go throughout this.
Please do. Yeah, jump right in the middle of this, no problem. I would rather make this an interactive discussion, really, as opposed to me talking at everyone. Let me address that question up front. How common is this, right? So what I got a lot of questions in the beginning of coronavirus, right? I heard everyone say, attacks are going through the roof. We actually didn't see that. The past 2 months, we absolutely have seen that. What has happened is there's been a big digital migration to work from home. And in some ways, work from home actually makes it a little harder on the bad guys, because you're not all in one location, within a network that's easier to hit. On the other side, it's opened up, some new attack vectors, or just placed additional emphasis. What we've seen a lot is an increased targeting of kind of VPN concentrators, right, with exploits, so you can rip creds out. Now, that's particularly bad. Why? If you're remoting into your network and there's some vulnerability, this is why you need to patch your equipment. This is something PGH does great with their patching program. But the point is, it allows a bad guy to get in the network with creds ahead of time. And size totally does not matter in this case. Like, we're about to walk into an incident response in a massive global company, probably this afternoon, but it's multiple times a week. We see everything from 5-person dentist office to 50-person, law firms. They're getting targeted all the time, because many times it's targets of opportunity. And so, the good news is, large or small, you kind of apply the same lessons learned and kind of that I'm going to talk about today, and you can really reduce your risk. So hopefully that gives a little window into kind of the volume that we're seeing.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I get asked a lot is, how did it get to this point where, literally every business is having to invest not only in cybersecurity software, but, we all know at this point that all the automated prevention systems in the world, they're fantastic. They've gotten way better, but it's not enough alone, and it really hasn't been for a long time. And so, what's been at the root cause of most breaches we see? And the reality is, if you take a step back and you look at how networking has changed over the past 15, 20 years, there's been a massive push towards convergence. So let's take a traditional physical security network, right? Cameras, badge swipes, that sort of thing. I remember when those were all hooked up with coax cable and writing to VHS, systems. Well, they're all IP enabled now. And many times there's one core system that's tying your physical security, your IoT, your login, and that's Active Directory, right? So it's really what we've seen as a convergence in an authentication system that's we all have to use it. We use it. I know probably every customer on this call has a Windows domain, but it's that convergence of your Windows domain infrastructure has made the game such that a bad guy's main focus when he gets into the network is to steal privileged credentials and then leverage them to live off the land. It does several things. One, it allows you to hide better, right? Because, if I'm using my credential on the network and someone else's, it's kind of hard to piece that together really quick in most environments. The other bit is those techniques tend to not light up traditional tools like anti-malware, antivirus, your firewalls, right? Because this is something you have to do every day in your network. So really what we've seen is we got to keep pushing forward on convergence. Why? It gives us business efficiencies. If you are able to operate today in the coronavirus land, it's probably entirely reliant on your IT infrastructure being up and running. And I've told a lot of our MSP partners out there, you guys are critical infrastructure at this point, because that is that kind of last link between being able to operate, in a kind of pandemic style situation or not. And so it's even more important that you really pay attention to this and really up your hygiene as much as you can. So now what I want to kind of move on to is really less the cyber side, less the computer side, and more the the social network diagramming side of a breach. And now, if someone scans ports in your network and a port's open and they just it's a target opportunity, this probably won't go down. If someone's decided, hey, I found this guy's creds on the dark web, he's a CEO, I want to go after his company, I'm going to kind of talk to you about how I always like to break down targets. So when I look at any organization and put my bad guy hat on, what I'm going to try and do is break it down to 3 distinct buckets, right? The first bucket would be, let's say my purpose is data theft. I want to break in and I want to steal data on a particular, maybe it's a defense contractor and they work on some technology that's important to the Chinese. I'm going to want to make a social network of those that create the information I want to steal, right? So, and what I'm going to cover is sources to get there. The next area is I'm going to make a social network of those that run the IT infrastructure. Right? Because why? They control access to the data that's on the network. Critical position, you got to do it, but it's important that you treat, IT administrators. I know PJH takes this very, very seriously as, a critical asset to the bad guy. The last bit is I want to make a network of those that have a reason to communicate with the outside world. I tell people all the time, in my opinion, it is much easier to target a commercial company than it is a sole person at home, like as far as breaking into their infrastructure. And the reason is you have a finance department that has to deal with accounts receivable and billing. You see a lot of, I would say, social engineering tactics to trick people into, wiring money places. The other thing you'll see is there's a marketing department, a sales department. So if I crafted an email, let's say you put a press release out on a new customer you got, and I crafted a request for quote from that customer, odds are your sales rep's probably going to open it. It's no knock on sales guys, but it looks like an opportunity, right? So you kind of take advantage of natural lines of communication. And so really this kind of social network analysis, one of the hardest things a hacker has to deal with is, okay, I have to go from probably some other part of the world. I got to land in your network and I'm going to be sitting at the command line. How do I go from there to finding, those humans I learned about on the internet that I want to target? How do I go find their accounts? I'm going to cover how that goes down today. So the next step would be, okay, I have this concept. I want to break down my target into 3 sort of bins. Now, where do I go to find info? And what type of info kind of is really helpful to the bad guys? What I like to do is, frankly, you go right onto professional social media sites as well as job sites, right? I used to be a network engineer before I got into hacking. And if I wrote my resume, I would be listing out all the versions of iOS I've worked on, the protocols I know, the firewall versions I've worked on. And what I see over and over again is folks will be on LinkedIn and they'll be literally listing out the critical systems that they work on. My bad guy hat on, that's the systems I got to expect to run into. So I start planning, okay, I'm going to land in there. How do I find a Cisco secure ACS server, right? Because this guy just told me on his LinkedIn profile, they're probably running it. Most humans, when they write a resume or they write, something on professional social media, will absolutely write about what they work on currently. It is just a natural tendency, right? So some advice there. When you go to put out a job ad and it's a critical position, but also that system is critical, don't put the exact details as to what that system is. It probably won't up your chances that much, but of landing the perfect candidate, but it sure arms a bad guy with what they expect to run into. The other
so
area,
what you're saying is don't put the passwords from the system directly in, or
that and
castle,
more. Right? I'm going to show you later in this presentation some real examples from the kind of critical infrastructure world. I'm talking like major power utilities, right? And the other area we find is job advertisements, right? So let's say, you're using 5 different security products in your environment. Don't write the job ad listing the exact products you're using. Right? That is like generally a bad plan because
like the versions, releases, like all that. Don't put all the versions or any of that in there,
You got it. That's straight up. So my point is when you go around on, you'd be shocked what I've found on kind of even the IT forums, what folks questions they're asking. Sometimes they divulge too much, you can tell. who the customer is. But the point is, just be cognizant of it. And the one thing you can do that is totally free is maybe just have everyone do a quick audit of what is everyone in your company writing about on LinkedIn. Are they kind of leaking any sensitive info that really has no extra value but has value to bad guys? This doesn't cost you anything, and it's a smart way to reduce your attack surface. So I talked about this example. So, you know, a lot of people, when they think what is worst case scenario in hacking, they immediately go to someone hacking utilities, whether that be power generation or dams or that sort of stuff. The reality is pulling that off in real life is pretty hard, right? And a lot of these systems have physical redundancies, but it's not impossible. I actually think manufacturers are usually the ones that get hurt the most from a cyber breach because so much of their manufacturing is integrated in with their Windows IT infrastructure. But I went with the kind of the typical worst case scenario for the sake of this presentation. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a little of this pre-exploitation research on cybersecurity folks and industrial security folks that work for major United States utilities, right? Major ones that we know nation states absolutely will be targeting. And immediately what I found is people were listing the exact firmware versions running on their firewall, the brand of their firewall. They were listing something called programmable logic controller versions. A PLC, right, is essentially, let's say you want to kind of open a damper in a commercial building. You're going to have your computer, and you're going to have something that's going to take the instructions from your computer and turn it into electrical signal to open or close something. That's your programmable logic controller. That's the world of industrial control hacking. But people were listing exactly what they're running, right? So this took me almost no time to find. To make it one step worse, there's actually a LinkedIn group dedicated to cybersecurity professionals for U.S. critical infrastructure. That is basically a group of targets for nation states. Right now, this might not apply to the type of business you're in, but my point to this is, you'd think the most sophisticated, groups in protecting, some of our most critical infrastructure would take a little bit more care, but it's just really natural to kind of fall into this trap. So just be cognizant of it.
So John, one of the other things that I noticed, for you had talked about just being cognizant of what you put out there on social media or even on your website. A lot of times people love to put out who their clients are on their websites, and that's just another one, right, where it's just basically giving the hacker access to, oh, okay, now I have access to potentially some pretty large clients here based on what their website shows you. So I think you have to be kind of cautious on how you approach that, right? Wouldn't you agree?
You are spot on. In fact, we wrestle this personally every day, right? I kind of have a policy. Generally, we're not going to be listing our customers, but some customers actually want to come make public statements or, say they're using your product or whatever. But yeah, I would totally say, especially if you are a smaller service provider and you are serving someone large, like when you look at the Target hack, for example, right? So this is an old hack. Everyone's covered it to death. But long story short, bad guys broke into Target. They got under their Windows domain infrastructure, and they put some malware in their point of sale systems that allowed them to grab credit cards out of memory before they were encrypted on disk. How'd they get in? They got in through their HVAC vendor.
Yep.
So they had a lighting and an HVAC vendor who had VPN access. So especially if you were like a boutique small service provider to big serious companies that would be a target, be very careful. I know it's a cost benefit analysis on marketing, but it is definitely an area that can get you into trouble and make you, which might not be normally a target, a big one, right, for a much more sophisticated attack. So you raise an excellent point on that. And I really, really believe in kind of what you said, is you got to be really careful there.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
So what I kind of want to talk about next is really a little bit of a checklist. Some people call this the kill chain, the life cycle of a hack, whatever you want to call it. But, there's several things that tend to happen in most breaches. And what I'm going to kind of cover is a kind of fake simulated breach that initial access comes by way of spear phishing. The reality is the vast majority of successful breaches we see actually, I'm talking corporate breaches where the whole company gets smashed, actually come from remote desktop protocol being open to the internet. It is. So I encourage everyone, to really consider, external vulnerability scanning, because it's really just kind of making sure like your front doors are locked. But I'm not going to cover that one because that's low-hanging fruit and very easy to kind of knock down. What I'm going to cover is the spear phishing phase. The next phase of a breach, which I think a lot of our cybersecurity industry actually sleeps on, is this phase of a breach when a hacker's trying to figure out where he is in the environment. It's actually quite tricky, especially if you're a larger business, for the bad guy. And so I want to cover a little bit of the tactics they like to use. And then what we're going to talk about is doing a little discovery on your Windows domain infrastructure, figuring out who the admins are, how that kind of goes on, how you find specific admins, and then finally the lateral spreading phase of a breach, which is an area where we definitely specialize in as a company. So let's get into it. So really, when we talk initial access, this sometimes can take a while. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard on the bad guy. But what we're talking about here is, how do they get that initial remote access into your network? I'm not talking about kind of hacking your Office 365 cloud infrastructures. That's a little bit of a different ball game. I'm talking about how do they break in and get code running on your computers. It generally happens a few ways. Maybe your remote desktop is open. Maybe there's some management software you can log into and push code that way. The way that, obviously, I'm sure everyone has received phishing emails, kind of malicious emails. They're trying to trick you into clicking a link or open a document. This is phishing. So one thing that's really important here is that you have some sort of education policy with your employees, and maybe even simulate, right, some phishing once or twice a year, so that your company is sensitized to when this happens. So in our fictitious example, kind of to Derek's point, you listing your customers on your website. I'm a bad guy. I go to your website. I'm like, okay, great. Your customers, Coca-Cola. What I'm going to do then is figure out who's in sales. Try and figure out if I can find a press release and something or LinkedIn that says who the sales rep is, and I'm going to send those guys a request for quote. And this is really going to be as a malicious PDF, that maybe you're going to put creds into, or maybe I can actually get to execute other code on your computer. But the point is, spear phishing is when it's an email targeted towards you, the person, right? So with content that you would be interested in opening, and the content here really would be, hey, sales guy, you might be able to make some money and close a new deal for an existing customer. I think you're going to get an open rate 9 times out of 10 in this case. So
yeah, we've actually seen that. They're actually doing that a lot they're spoofing colleges and sending out RFP requests to, like, we actually get it to our website a fair amount. And, as a managed service provider, we understand these are not legitimate, and
Yep.
We know how to look at the telltale signs, but that's a very valid attack, that they're using right now, because we've actually seen it a number of times. So
yeah, absolutely. The other one we're seeing a lot, and this almost has nothing to do with hacking, this is just con man game, is sending like, hey, I didn't receive payment for this invoice, blah, 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 right? And this is that kind of wire fraud transaction. I got a horror story about, a friend of mine that got hit with this and lost $200,000 from his business. But so let's assume, the victim opened the email and the bad guy has remote access. This next phase of a breach, which is an area we focus really, really heavily on, we run a 24/7 SOC, right? And so we're actively kind of looking at this stuff and trying to take actions to stop it. But it's this initial discovery phase of a breach. So this is when a bad guy's landed, right? If I spear phish you and you open it, I actually don't know, are you on your laptop at home? Are you on your laptop home VPN? Did you open it from the office? Like, I have to figure this out, right? So we're going to do things like, I'm going to trace route out to maybe Google or Yahoo and see how many hops from the computer I landed on to Google, right? I might SSH, which is, a form of, remote access on network devices most of the time in Linux servers. I might SSH to my default gateway so I can get a sense. Do you have a banner running on these machines that say, hey, this is a Blackpoint router, violators would be prosecuted? NSA actually recommended doing that, probably because a lawyer said to. From the bad guy side, it actually tells me I landed in the right spot. So that's another area. I think it's very important. If you have like a remote kind of Outlook access or anything like this, think about not putting your logo up there and making it so obvious like this is actually you, because that is one of the tricky parts. You just don't know a lot of times where you're going to land. So this discovery phase is a critical phase, because when you get to this part of a hack, this means the bad guy got code running on your computer and the anti-malware hasn't stopped it, right? So this whole next phase of the breach is usually when you see companies that get in the news for getting popped, it's because they didn't catch up on this phase and everything that came after it. So what we like to do is we like to monitor privileged access that's coming, into critical systems in an IT environment, domain controllers, network devices, you name it, because, bad guys are always pushing to try and get those privileged creds. And when you have those, this is the phase where they're going to test them. As in a little aside, we had a customer, they were ransomwared, they paid the ransom, then they became our customer. The bad guys came in 2 weeks later after they paid again. They've actually VPN'd in, and this is exactly how we caught them. We found them testing creds, trying to mount admin share drives, trying to laterally spread, making registry edits, and we stopped it. But this phase is key, because a lot of times, if a bad guy is able to get remote access into your network by legitimate, well, air quotes, legitimate reasons, like via VPN, there's no malware involved yet, right? This is what I'd call tradecraft, others call behavior. So that's the discovery phase. Now, the next phase that is kind of tricky, this is where you start taking the research you did in the outside, on LinkedIn maybe as a bad guy, and you have to make that match up with what you're seeing inside the network. So if you remember, when I talk about those 3 bins you break a target down into, those that have the data you want to steal, those that run the network, the IT, and those that have reason to communicate with the outside world. Once I'm in the network, before I'm even going to try and find the people who have the data I want, I'm actually going to try and find privileged credentials. Because once I have those, I can go everywhere, and I can have more hooks in the network to ensure that if you shut your laptop off, I don't get knocked out of the network, right? So this is where Active Directory, it's extremely powerful. Every modern org, this is kind of the core IT system that ties your whole Windows network together. It also can be a little bit like a phone book, right? So I can, just as a non-privileged user who's on domain computer, I can ask questions. For example, tell me all the accounts that are in the domain admins group, and it'll spit back to me a result. And what I'm going to be doing there is saying, all right, I found this fictitious guy on LinkedIn. His name is Frank Miller, and he claims he's the head admin guy there. Can I go find his account now? So this is the phase where you're trying to really target people. This is also a similar technique you can use to go find maybe the CEO, right? Maybe you want to get right to his computer. And the point is, trying to find people in the ether in the network is a tricky phase. And so it's one of the areas we look at and we observe in real time with our customers, just because it's so critical, and it's very binary. It's either privileged, legit IT work, or it's not. Like, there's usually nothing that falls in the middle. So this is kind of the hunting phase. I would say one other thing you can do here in a Windows environment, and this gets a little bit technical, there's something called net logon sessions that hang around. So there's kind of a 15-minute window, but I can actually ask the domain controller, tell me where you saw username F Miller logged in. Most of the times you don't get a good response, but sometimes it tells you the exact IP he's on right now because he authenticated within 15 minutes. There's a little window in there. So this is another technique bad guys like to use, but this is that hunting phase on the bad guy side where he's trying to, get to those privileged creds. Now, the next phase, this is usually, this is an area where I think we have like a distinct advantage in detection and stopping hacks. This is the lateral spreading phase. And this is the area we've seen companies traditionally really struggle with. And what this really means is, if you look at hacking over the past 10 years, I actually think a lot of the malware is a bit less sophisticated, and it's for good reason. A long time ago, you could make super malware that has a module to do everything: screenshots, turn on the camera, turn on the mic, sniff network traffic. But but then it gets caught by AV. It used to be you flip a couple bits in the program, it looks different, AV doesn't pick up on it. Well, anti-malware and antivirus, same thing. Platforms got a lot better. And so what happened is you saw a shift in hacking tradecraft where bad guys started using really lightweight throwaway tools, commodity tools, and also legitimate tools. Maybe it's TeamViewer, log me in, right? Some sort of simple remote access tool. And then their whole goal is steal creds and then use all the hooks in your Windows environment that allow an admin to copy files, move files, remotely execute programs, might be patches in a legitimate case. But they use this to spread their malware and then remotely execute it. This is called the lateral spreading phase of a breach. In almost every case, there's only a few exploits that have come out in the past that mostly focused on exploiting SMB or kind of the share infrastructure in a Windows environment that didn't use privileged creds. So this is actually the commonest. We have a lot of patents. We monitor every privileged auth that comes inbound to a machine in an environment, and then we figure out what's going on and bring the data back. So this spreading phase is key. When you get to this phase in a ransomware attack, you're probably within 15 to 30 minutes of having your whole company encrypted. We've seen cases in major corporations. There was a worm that came out a few years ago that I believe the Russians used to attack the Ukrainian financial system, and it went wild. And so it started hitting major companies all over the world. It hit Maersk Shipping. It hit the company that makes Cadbury chocolates, and those were killing tens of thousands of computers in like 5-10 minutes. Right? It was pretty nasty. So this spread phase is key, that you got to knock it down right now because it's really your last chance. So the next thing that comes, and I hear a lot of people say, I have AV, I have next gen AV EDR, like the best endpoint stuff out there, and I have this great firewall stuff you have to have. That's like bare minimum these days, in my opinion. Why do I still get hacked? Why am I not protected? Right? Well, the reason is if you just rely on systems that look at traffic over the wire to detect, malicious exfil or someone sending files out of your network, that'll never be good enough. It never has been. And the reason's as follows. It's extremely easy to defeat traffic, based appliances that look at traffic, over the wire, try to determine something's malicious. Why? If I wrote malware today, or we had kind of new piece of malware, I would make the command and control and the exfil maybe over Office 365's API. So I would ask you guys, especially the IT folks that are on the call, how many systems would tell the difference between in SSL encrypted Office 365 that's legitimate or not legitimate? It looks identical, right? And that's a great way to use a business system against itself. So my point to this is data exfil offers some opportunities to block known bad, but most every breach, we see, almost every breach we see has new command control infrastructure that wasn't previously known as bad. So traffic analysis appliances are critical to have, but think of them more as the lock on your front door. Don't rely on those, right? And the same goes for AV. And AV is, orders of magnitude more effective, I'd say, than over the network sort of systems. But this exfil phase is really the last phase. And my point to this slide is, if it's me, you want to make sure you reduce down your attack surface, for your kind of public infrastructure, and you really need to lock down those privileged accounts that are operating your network. Those two things tend to be the root cause of most breaches that I've seen. So some lessons learned on the kind of defense opportunities that you have that really shouldn't cost you too much money, that can at least, kind of cover your bases a little bit. So the first thing is sometimes look at leveraging your own infrastructure to detect tactics. For example, Derek, I'm sure you guys are administering routers and switches all the time, right? It's, kind of core networking infrastructure. A great way, yes, and I'm sure you guys do this, is anytime someone connects to like a key firewall or something else, you kind of want to make sure that's logged, right? It's very binary. It's either your guys or it's not, right? And that's like an obvious, use your network as a sensor. Sounds like my video might be a little bit glitchy. I'm not sure why, so I apologize for that. So that's one area. The other thing is live auditing of privileged account use. It's one of the things we do in our MDR service. I think it's relatively affordable, but this is, if you cover that and you can see exactly what's going on, that's an area you can really stop most breaches. Next thing, run a really quality advanced malware product. PGH, uses the right ones. They're good guys to trust on that front. The other area is least privilege policy. Really do an audit of all your systems and kind of admin accounts. That is what we see all the time, is old admin accounts, too many, misappropriation of, of privileges. That's another important area. And lastly, maybe just consider scrub on your social media, right? And have a policy as a company about kind of if you're talking about the exact versions of IT systems on your LinkedIn page, to me, that's corporate secrets, right? Because they're critical to you now, especially in COVID time. The last thing, and am I doing all right on time, Derek? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're going great. So
excellent. Excellent. So we'll leave some time for Q&A, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
So wanted to kind of cover a case study. So, we onboarded a customer in early July. It was a city. This customer is already owned, unfortunately. So the bad guys were already in there, but luckily they hadn't ransomwared these guys just yet. And so, one of the things that was challenging, and this is another reason, we love the managed IT service provider space, is your MSP is your best IT hygiene tool, right? So making sure, if they're approaching you and saying, guys, you're running some end of life 2003 server or something old that you can't secure anymore, listen to them. We saw a customer get smashed recently that didn't listen, and it was all because of this old end of life gear. So perfect case. This particular city was running some really antiquated stuff that we couldn't even run on, right? So we had no visibility into this. So we go out, we roll out, and then what we noticed, especially if it's kind of Eastern Europe, Russian-based organized crime, Friday nights, 6, 7 p.m. Eastern time, going to like 6, 7 a.m. Saturday morning is when they really get busy on their ransomware game. I mean, they do it 7 days a week, but we just notice a big uptick because I think they know we left work and we're going to happy hour doing whatever we do. So bad guys get in. I want to say it was probably just before 1 a.m. Our system and our SOC absolutely lit up like a Christmas tree. It was basically a coordinated attack, lateral spreading to every critical server in this environment all at once, right? Worst case scenario. So the bad guys were already in the network. They already had privileged creds. They had already enumerated, right? And now they're going to execute and get this job done, ransomware this place. So one of the things that is really important when we talk about managed detection and response, which is what we do, is us sending you an email that you have an event or an issue is not good enough. You're relying on us or service like ours to actually take action and stop it. So what we had to do is we actually had 4 senior analysts working on this simultaneously because there was so much volume. And we had to go in, and they had multiple command control channels, which means they had 2 forms of access to the infected servers. They were on the 911 dispatch server, the police chat server, their fire alarm server, their fire dispatch server. They were on all their security and access control servers, and they had creds for every account in the entire network. This was way too close for comfort for us, right? But when you land in a place that's already owned, you kind of gotta deal with it sometimes. And I would say they were 30 minutes out from having this whole city to have a Baltimore-like event. Our office is outside of Baltimore, and if you read in the news, Baltimore got ransomware twice, right? And it takes down everything, the ability to pay water bills and you name it. And if you look at it, what was actually the common in this? It was stealing privileged credentials and using them. So if we take a step back, the things you can do, and I'm going to wrap up here, we can go to Q&A. The things that you can do to really tighten your attack surface Like, lock down and make sure you're not, giving secrets away for free on social media. That's table stakes. It's easy, right? Next thing, any cloud-based, any internet-based system you have to log into, and if it supports multi-factor authentication, absolutely turn on. It is not negotiable. That one piece of advice could save you immediately from a really bad day. And
it's huge.
It's huge. It's everything. The other thing is, if possible, that second factor, it's usually a code that changes. Make sure if they support it, you're using an app-based code as opposed to SMS. I'm going to pause and give one horror story here, because if it happens to save someone, it'll be great. A buddy of mine calls me all freaked out. He's a business owner. I just had $200,000 stolen from me. Can you come help me? So I jumped in. We traced it back. This is exactly what happened. Bad guy, the odds of your creds being on the dark web somewhere are really high, just because we've all used systems that have been breached and been dumped. A lot of people like to reuse their password between accounts. This guy was no different. Bad guys found his creds, said, oh, this guy's a really wealthy CEO dude, right? Let's go after his company. They said, all right, let's try and log into his Office 365. Oh, wow, it worked. Cool. Next thing they did, who's this? Let's find a bill or something to figure out who his phone provider is. Oh, it's T-Mobile. Let's go try these same creds in the T-Mobile account. Ooh, they worked. So what did they do next? They made a forwarding rule to forward all his phone calls to their little burner cell phone. Then they go back into his email, and they make a rule to say, all new email, go to the archive folder. You know what they were doing? They're preventing the victim from seeing the fact that they were signing up for new accounts. He can't see anything. The next thing they did is they called his bank and said, hey, I can't log into my account. Something's wrong with it. And they said, no problem. Can you verify your SOCH? That he had it from his email. They had already gotten it from, I forget where they got that from, but they found it in his email. Then they said, okay, we're going to send you a second factor to their phone. They got the second factor. Boom, they're in his bank account. Then they made a wire transfer to a US-based bank that had a Bitcoin company as a customer. They transferred the $200,000, put the second factor again in with the bank, and the rest was history. It didn't fall under any of the treasury kind of holds on external wires. What was the root cause of that? No single factor on Office 365. It was that simple. If he had that on, none of this would have happened.
We tell people all the time. We do so just to add to one of the big keys to protection is and you had mentioned is that education piece, right? And just making sure that you educate people on why not to click the link, why to not use the same password everywhere, why to make sure you enable two-factor. And we were mentioning one of the biggest things that you can protect is your personal email account, because honestly, if somebody can get into your personal email account, they can do really a lot of damage to you or even if your corporate email to your business, because there's a lot of things that come in there and there's a lot of things that are saved in there that they can really do a lot of, review of. So
absolutely, that is key. So multi-factor and any of that web stuff, web login stuff, it's key. So really, when we go back and look at this particular breach, the only malware we saw actually involved was actually the ransomware, files themselves. Everything else was really live off the land. They used TeamViewer to get in and out. So nothing tripped. And so the common here was they stole privileged creds and lived off the land. So, one of the things we believe really strongly in is we put in the best of breed technologies to do auto prevent, but you better have an answer for when those don't work, because it's going to happen. And that's kind of our models. We integrate to prevent stuff, and then we focus on everything that happens outside of that in that gray area where it's a kind of mix between system administration type tactics where it's hard to cover. And so, a little bit of an example. Luckily, this particular city attack, we had to withstand 3 more waves of attack because the city was so poorly, designed from an IT and so legacy. There's a lot of holes in it, so the guys could keep coming back in. So again, hygiene, patching, keep your systems up to date, adopt a cloud first policy if you can, and use multi-factor authentication. And I think that will make your life a heck of a lot better. So with that, I think kind of done with my portion of the presentation. Would love to open it up for Q&A or whatever's next, Derek.
Perfect. It's we have a couple questions, and I think I kind of want to just elaborate on a few of those things, right? So, Dawn, as part of what the Blackpoint offering, which you guys have been a great partner for us, and really have watched. We can't be security experts and experts of everything and all things that are IT. And then even from a client perspective, right? The client needs to focus on their business and not focus on, being an IT expert or whatnot. So, I mean, where you have really watched our back, right? From a security perspective. And, we think we do a lot of good things. We do a lot of things right? We do put that antivirus out there. We do make sure that we keep our systems up to date and patched, especially third-party patching and Windows patching, right? Because it's very important. We do make sure that we put out firewalls that are constantly up to date, and we're always looking at, the policies and whatnot. But as you had mentioned before, that's just a lot of that stuff in the education and a few other things. A lot of that stuff's just not enough. So, where does Blackpoint kind of fit in from the perspective, we are doing this stuff already, right? And, at what point do you say, hey, it's really time to leverage somebody like a Blackpoint for managed detection and response and kind of watch that secondary perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, if, the convergence of all this IT infrastructure has enabled a lot of efficiencies in business. So you as a company are getting a lot of benefits out of this, and you need that to be reliable, it needs to be up, and it needs to be secure, right? Because now we have a lot more liabilities involved, when there is a breach, right? Whether it's getting sued from some of your customers or whatever. So, to me, I would say anyone that is reliant on their IT infrastructure, they're really candidates for it. And the thing is, if you tried to run the math on running your own 24/7 SOC staffed, I mean, you can count just shifts, how many people that would cost, the tooling, the expertise. So the model we came up with was really, a model where we're able to handle a large volume of companies, and we can make it work financially where it doesn't cost the end user that much money to get like a true 24/7 SOC. It's something they could never roll their own. And so, if you don't use something like that, the only thing that's really going to save you is your antivirus, right? Yeah. Or maybe a DNS tool or a firewall. The odds are, and so what happens if someone is able to get privileged creds, you're really not going to have any legitimate defenses. And so you have to make that kind of risk and cost, decision yourself. Is, am I willing to accept this risk? And the other thing should be, you should just do a little tabletop. If I did have a company ransom event, is this going to be existential? Do I have a backup plan? Like, so that's another reason from your MSPs is like, pay for the best backup platform program they have. Whatever that is, just spend the money. It is so worth it. Trust me, like, I've watched tons of businesses go out of business, and that's terrible to see, right? You just want to focus on what you do best. Let the IT professionals handle their part and let the security pros handle their part. So for me, it's really comes down to, how important is your IT infrastructure for your business to even work. So I hope that's a good answer. Obviously,
absolutely.
We'd love everyone to sign up. We know it's not practical, but you're just playing a little bit of Russian roulette if you don't. I mean, it's risk reward like everything.
Everything's just, it's changing, right? Everything, the threat landscape's just constantly changing. So I think having a company like Blackpoint, just kind of watching our back and your back as a client, it just adds to the level of security that you can kind of take comfort in, right?
Yeah, there's a compliance driver, Derek, for a lot of this stuff too. So you might, if you're doing kind of defense work, if you're PCI, HIPAA, a healthcare org, like the expectation these days is that you're going to have a lot more than just kind of antivirus in there, right? So, there might be compliance drivers that force you to do this as well. It's another.
Yeah, and it seems like more and more industries are actually starting to adopt more and more compliance drivers, right? So I know construction is a new industry for compliance drivers with what is it, CMMC, and a number of different applications where what we always recommend is you should be as secure, if not more secure, than any of the compliance-based industries, and that will really help you from a protection perspective. So in that regard, I know one of the questions that came up was, so let's say you do all this stuff, you're never 100% secure from our perspective. Let's say something does happen. What are your thoughts on, you do get ransomware? What are your thoughts on paying the ransom?
Well, it's probably different than what the FBI is going to recommend. Here's the deal. If you're caught between a rock and a hard place, you're ransomed and you can't get out of it, you pay. Sorry, it's people don't like to hear that. People say, "Oh, you're just feeding the bad guys." Well, are you going to go out of business? I mean, unfortunately, if you have a great backup strategy and you're like, I can withstand this, I'm good to go. Now, here's one thing that's changed, really mostly in 2020. It used to be bad guys come in, they ransomware you, and you got to pay them, and you'll get the keys back to unencrypt your files, right? Let's say you had awesome backups, PGH had everything, squared away. You can tell them to go pound salt. It'll probably disrupt you for a couple of weeks, but you'll be back in business, and you can tighten up your infrastructure and find out how they got in. Well, what they're doing now is right before they ransom you, they're stealing as much data of yours as they can, and they'll post screenshots of it on the dark web, right? And then send you a note with screenshots saying, hey, you want to get your computers unlocked? Pay the ransom. Do you want us to not dump all of your customer data on the internet and make this public? You better pay the ransom. So what they're doing is now they're using your data as a hostage. Right. And so this is really hurting companies. And it's a really nasty technique because, if you're in healthcare, let's say you're running an orthopedic practice and they have tons of your, EPHI, your patient data, and they dump that out, you're probably going to get sued. Right. And so now you got this other thing. So that goes right into thoughts on cyber liability insurance. Yes. Get it. Yes. Have it. Limits as much as you can afford. That's my answer on that one. Because it's weird in a way. Like, I don't blame the insurance industry at all. I mean, but the insurers are a lot of the guys paying the ransom. So most of them have a forensics company who's skilled at negotiating with these guys to get the ransom down a bit. But it's odd, it's kind of odd sometimes because, it does perpetuate it, but the bad guys are going to do it anyway. So I've seen companies who have been ransomware, had their data theft, their data stolen, and the only reason they were able to pay and get it back is because of their insurance policy. They didn't have enough cash on hand or credit to do it. So the answer to, for me is absolutely, and as much as you can withstand financially on the coverage side.
Yeah, and to mention, it's, the key to cyber liability insurance is to understand that is not the solution to cybersecurity. It is a piece. It's protecting you if something does happen. It's not it's not your vest, right?
Oh yeah, no, you can't just rely on that because the reality is you still might not be able to get back up and running too easy without a hack. You don't want it to go there because the other thing that happens, how many people have been ransomware more than once? Right? And so what happens is you get popped. The insurance company realizes like you were a big hot mess before on the IT hygiene side. How easy do you think it is going to be insured the next time?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we see a ton of it all the time, right? I mean, and I'm sure you do too, that people don't think they're going to get hit again. So they don't make the necessary changes or the necessary security, upgrades in order to kind of protect themselves. And then the hacker's like, hey, this is free, and they pay the ransom. Bam. I'm going to hit you again.
Yep. That is exactly what we just stopped, like a week and change ago, in a big company that had just been hit. It's pretty wild.
So I appreciate all the time that you put in today. I mean, you're absolutely a trusted advisor for PGH, and anybody out there that's on this live event and if you are looking to kind of increase your level of security, you could reach out to us or reach out to Blackpoint. I mean, I definitely would recommend taking some time to better listen to how they can protect you, because the story is pretty great. The way that they approach how they're looking at these applications and how they're kind of protecting you is pretty it's a pretty different way than what some of the other security companies are doing. And I think it's a really beneficial way that really helps to kind of get you protected faster. So if something does happen, they're kind of on it like really, really quickly, just with the way that they leverage some of their homegrown tools that they've been working for many years building. So thank you so much for that, John. So what I'd like to do now, if okay, is I'd like to just send out some thank yous to everybody. So whether you guys know or not, we've had a lot of people in the background really helping us to be successful in these events. So I'd like to first and foremost thank Nicole Murtha over here at PGH Networks. She's really been doing a great job on marketing these events, and she's been working with the team at Spark Designs. So specifically Mackenzie and Liz over there at Spark Designs have really just done a fantastic job for us during these episodes. So with that being said, I wanted to take a few seconds. We had talked briefly about a couple giveaways that we're going to be doing, and we're going to go ahead and roll through the wheel of names. I think the first giveaway we're going to do today is we're going to give away some whiskey. So we're going to do the Blackpoint whiskey. So thank you so much, John, and your team for giving away some of your excellent whiskey. So Nicole, if you could go ahead and give us a quick spin, and let's see who wins the first giveaway. All right. And the first winner of the whiskey from Blackpoint Cyber is Ankit Gupta. Thank you so much, Ankit, for joining the event. We'll be reaching out to you after the event to get information to ship that out to you, and have a drink on us. Thank you so much. We have one more giveaway today, which is pretty exciting. So, as I had mentioned, in the theme of work from home during being in, as John would say, Corona land right now, we are going to be giving away a Wi-Fi mesh solution through Ubiquity. So if we could get another spin, let's see who the lucky winner will be. Here we go. It's getting close. And we got Jennifer Barnett. Jennifer Barnett is with one of our friends, Chris Flickinger. And Jennifer, we already have your shipping information, so we'll go ahead and send that out to you. Congratulations. And give us a call if you need help setting that up. So I want to say thank you again, everybody, for joining. Please make sure that you join us for the next episode 4 of Lunchbox Leaders. We'll be doing that in September. We'll be sending out the information on the event, I believe, probably starting today or tomorrow. So please go ahead and join again. We will have Sophos joining us next time in our September event. And thank you again for everyone joining, and have a great day. See ya.